والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد, we've mentioned a number of times in previous talks and previous gatherings that every letter and every word of the Quran is relevant to every single Muslim in some way or other. Now, obviously, we understand that there are aspects of the Quran which are geared towards leadership. There are verses of the Quran which are geared towards individuals. There are verses of the Quran which pertain in its rulings to women more so than men, and vice versa. There are aspects of the Quran which were revealed before Hijrah, aspects of the Quran which were revealed after Hijrah, addressing the believers as a group, addressing them as a minority, addressing them as a majority, etc. We understand that, but nonetheless, we are encouraged individually, on the individual level, to recite the Quran in its entirety. And we are encouraged on the individual level to ponder upon its meanings, every single letter, every single word of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in 3 different places in the Quran that He revealed the Quran لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, so that the recipients of the Quran would contemplate its meanings, contemplate its verses, all of its verses, not just some, all of its verses. And that is because all of its verses are relevant to all people and all Muslims in one way or another. And there is something for us to learn and better ourselves with in every single verse. And because of this, whenever we read something, for instance, that has to do with a law that Allah has prescribed, something that for a minority of Muslims living amongst the majority who are ruled by other than Islam, those particular laws may not be able to be upheld, right? However, those laws are a reflection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, of His wisdom, and that is beneficial and of consequence to everyone, all of the time. It's important for us to know that if we understand that, then we understand that every verse is relevant to every one of us in some way or other. The question is, why does Allah tell us certain things in the Quran? What is the lesson or the moral that we are to derive? For instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in more than one place in the Quran that we have been created from clay, that the human being was created from clay. This is kind of common knowledge to us all as Muslims, and we kind of almost take it for granted. But the question is, why do I need to know that? Why did my Creator deem it necessary to inform me that I was originally created from clay? I'm not clay anymore, right? I am more than that now. But I was originally created from clay. What do we derive from something like that? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us, in a narration collected by Imam al-Tirmidhi, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يكون هواه تبعا لما جئت به. This narration has some weakness in its chain, but its meaning is emphatically correct. It's found throughout the Quran and Sunnah. He said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, none of you will truly believe until his desire is in accordance with that which I have been sent with. Meaning that there is a difference between I don't do this because Allah has prohibited it, but I want to do it. I wish I could do it, but I can't. There's a difference between that and I don't do this because Allah prohibited it and I don't want to do it. I dislike genuinely what Allah has prohibited, right? I do this, I pray my prayers on time, for instance. Though, and sometimes I find it difficult in myself to do that. There's a difference between that and I do this on time, every time, and I genuinely like that. Because a person's desires now, his will has been bent to be in accordance with what the Prophet ﷺ has been sent with. That is a very advanced level of faith. That means that a person practices the commandments of Allah and His Messenger so rigorously that they don't have to force themselves anymore. They have changed their nature, right? And this is something that our society rejects as a notion in general, you know? This person grew up in a bad home. He, had some unresolved issues as a child. He has some trauma, right? The touted trauma, the mythical trauma. He has trauma, and now he'll never recover. And serial killers are like that because they have physiological problems in their brain, and they could never be different even if they wanted to. And this issue of nature versus nurture and all this stuff, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us we're created from clay. The nature of clay is that you can change what it looks like. It's malleable. Of course, the longer out it sits, the less malleable it becomes with time. It dries out and you can't change it in any very meaningful way once it gets older and older. But it doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just means that it's more difficult. A person can reach a level where their nature is in accordance with what Allah has commanded. They can reshape their will to match the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if they so choose, and if they open their hearts enough. Any person can be rehabilitated, provided that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides them. For this reason, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say in every or most of his khutab on Jumu'ah and before marrying people, and oftentimes before addressing a mass of people or addressing certain companions, he would say, whomever Allah guides, none can misguide. And whomever Allah misguides, none can guide. Right? That's the condition. Not is your biology too strong and too hardwired that you cannot be rehabilitated. No. Any human being can be guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And any person can reach a degree where their desires, their honest desires and their inclinations match the commandments of Allah and His Messenger. This is possible. And that is what we all aim for. And for this reason, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us that none of you will truly believe, meaning the highest level of Iman is that a person's nature, his desires, his natural inclinations is in accordance with that which I have been sent with. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us the straight path. We ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala that He make us of those who hear the truth and have the audacity and courage to follow it. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.